Is it a good idea to start with some just brief meditation to calm the mind? Because obviously from our normal daily life we have many distractions and many thoughts. And the point of the Buddha Dharma, what Buddha taught, is to find the real mind, what we call the natural mind, which is clear, and it doesn't have, I'll be honest with you, it doesn't have all the fears and anxiety and confusion that this, what we call the relative mind or the surface mind has. That relative mind, that surface mind, is what we use in our normal daily life, and it is known as the gross mind. And beneath that, this is the important point, that beneath that gross mind is the subtle mind, and beneath that is the very subtle mind. And when we go to sleep at night, our gross mind withdraws into the subtle mind. And that subtle mind has a lot less confusion. It's still, as you know, able to dream and project, but generally it is less confused, less chaotic. And the point of this meditation, to start with, just a small brief calming of the mind, is to just bring about some kind of bit more clarity. Let go of the thoughts, let go of the chaos. So if you have got anything, as they say in English, if you've got anything on your mind at the moment, please for a few minutes now just let it go, and try to allow the mind, this is a carefully chosen words, allow the mind to relax within itself, and try to no longer move the mind to your will. Allow it to just rest as it is. So if you sit, if you can try to straighten the back slightly and not have a too curved spine, and eyes open or closed, it's up to you, but the main thing is peaceful and relaxed and calm. And in the silence, what you can do is you can blend the mind with the silence. Even if there is noise and distraction, don't worry about it. Try to find the silence, stillness in the atmosphere, and blend the mind with it. And through that, the mind will become calmer and clearer. So as you may notice, there's thoughts and feelings, and this is our habit. That the reason that is occurring in your mind at this moment is because it's the habit. This is what our mind is doing all the time, day and night. And so at home, if you can try to start a regular session every day, just for a few minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and try to sit down and release all mental action, leaving only what we call the producer, and deleting or removing the produced. So the producer is the mind, The produced are the thoughts, attitudes, intentions, emotions, memories, everything that the mind does for a few moments, few minutes each day, mind only, no mind action. And a very great, a future Buddha gave a teaching centuries ago. And in this, he was the one who originally taught the meditation of 21 breaths. And so what you can do, and it's a very effective method, is to count 21 breaths. So one breath is in and out. So an inhalation and an exhalation is 1 and then 2, and then you just concentrate on that. All other thoughts, attitudes, emotions, everything gone. You 100% what we call needle point concentration on just the sensation of the breath coming in and out, and then you count. So if you want to try that now, just to get some brief experience of it. Rest your mind on the breath. Try and concentrate single pointedly on the breath and the count. If your mind wanders, just gently bring it back. And come back into this room, and you should find that your mind is somewhat calmer. Obviously, if this becomes your daily practice, you do become expert in it, and the effect is wonderful. Better concentration, tamer, what we call a tamer mind. Taming the mind is a very important term in Buddha's teaching, Dharma. And if you can control the mind, it's a very, very great thing. At the moment, our mind is out of control and generally does its own thing. And we are on the sidelines, really. Most of the time, the mind is following its own propensities, habits. And we're not really in control of it. We're kind of using it, and it's doing its own thing, and it's very confusing. But when you tame the mind, you will have more chance to examine it. Buddha's strongly recommended that we investigate what the mind does and not just trust it and follow it as if everything it does is correct. As we know, there's so much suffering, and there are so many problems in the world, and all the suffering actually is due to assumption, assuming that what the mind thinks, what the mind intends, what the mind does is correct. The mind of every sentient being in what we call samsara, which is the Sanskrit word for existence, is confused and deluded to some point. And samsara has 6 realms, and those realms are examples. They exemplify the level of confusion and delusion in the beings' minds in those realms. So at the moment we are in the lowest of the higher realms, but all 6 realms of existence, from the lowest to the highest, are suffering. And that is the very important point that Buddha tried to explain to us, and what we need to deeply understand, because we don't want suffering, we want happiness. And every day and every night we have a certain amount of suffering in some way. For us at the moment, that's a vast amount of that suffering is what we call imperceptible. You can't perceive it, and so it doesn't feel like we're suffering. We're not able to perceive it. As you proceed towards liberation, as your mind becomes clearer, it becomes more sensitive, more subtle. Your self-grasping or your level of delusion decreases, but you also become more aware. And this kind of suffering, the imperceptible suffering and the general suffering of existence, we all have challenges and trials in our life, and we are all susceptible to illness and disagreeable situations. We can overcome it. It's possible to, through Dharma practice, Buddha's teachings, it is possible to understand the basis of existence. And when we understand the basis of existence, how this came about, I mean, obviously this is quite advanced, we can understand why we suffer, why there is suffering. And it's all basically down to delusion, having the wrong, what we call inappropriate attention. We are following our mind's propensities, habits, which have built up since beginningless time. I mean, let's just say many past lives. And due to those things that have happened, that survival instinct in those past lives, our mind is now reacting to that habit. As simple as that. It's as simple as that. And yet, because we've got this very strong sense of identity now in this life, we identify heavily with this life, the sufferings in this life seem very personal. And yet, they're not. It's actually caused by the state of the mind, the delusions in the mind, our delusions. And so, because of this situation, I'm trying to describe the situation that we're in. All right, we are seemingly vulnerable to suffering, and tonight's talk is about how we got into this situation. The Buddhas, not just the Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, the most recent Buddha, but all the Buddhas since beginningless time, they appear in realms, in the worlds, to explain this very thing. And this Buddha, Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, he taught these 4 great seals. And they're called 4 great seals because very much like in the old days when the king used to seal a document with the wax seal, with a stamp, or sometimes he wore a ring. These are the 4 great seals of the Wisdom King, and the Wisdom King is the Buddha, Lord Buddha Shakyamuni. I can't even begin it's absolutely incomprehensible, the wisdom of a Buddha. The Buddha is actually a manifestation of the pure basis, ground, nature of mind, fabric of reality. There are no, it's just very, very difficult to explain. But basically, once the mind is completely pure and completely virtuous, 100% pure, absolute purity. In other words, we're talking about absolute compassion for all beings and absolute wisdom, which understands the true nature of reality, then one manifests or can manifest as a Buddha. That is what a Buddha, a fully enlightened Buddha is. So it's the ultimate teacher. So obviously the teachings he gave are incredibly deep and difficult from where we are. From where we are, they are difficult to understand. But you can do it. The Buddhist path is called a path because day by day you take a step and you progress and proceed gradually, and believe me, you can get there. You absolutely get there. It's a path, and as long as you keep going, you will one day eventually get to the destination. It's absolutely true. And the methods that Buddha gave, and of course, since the Buddha, Lord Buddha Shakyamuni 2,500 years ago, the Tibetan schools have had many, many great realized and enlightened masters, and many, many beings have gained liberation and enlightenment through the Buddha's teachings. And so here we are tonight, continuing that path. And that's a wonderful thing. So that's a wonderful reason why we're here to try to understand these profound teachings. So the four great seals are taught by the Buddha, and they are very, very general, and they are antidotes to suffering. Four medicines, basically like four medicines for four aspects of our illness. Our illness is the cause of our suffering. Let me just explain something about suffering. Like I said, we don't really want suffering, and some of it is imperceptible and some of it is perceptible, perceivable. We can experience it, and we do know vaguely what suffering is like. But even if you go through your whole life with no suffering at all, in the end, that will be suffering because, for example, higher than us, higher than the human realm, there are the long life gods. And in the long life god realm, they have luxurious, wonderful, beautiful conditions for a very, very long time. But in the end, it ends the same as everything. And that is links very nicely to the first line, which is all conditioned things are impermanent. The word conditioned in that line is not really necessary because all it needs to say really is all things are impermanent. There aren't any things that aren't conditioned. Every single thing, whether it's inanimate or animate, every person, every being that's ever lived, that ever will live, and that's ever living now, is a collection of conditions. Obviously there's the parents, and obviously there's all the food and the air and the water and everything that it supports that being. And so it's a constant, sustained collection. There is no need, I don't really want to go into that yet. The point is that because these things are a collection, every single thing is a collection that has come together, then necessarily they must separate. That is a natural law and something that we need to accept, but we find it difficult to accept. And not only do we find it difficult to accept, but we actually deny it, and we prefer the assumption of permanence. But anyway, we'll come to that. So that was a talk 2 months ago, the first line, impermanence, and the second line was the last talk we gave, and that was contamination. All contaminated things cause suffering. All contaminated things cause suffering means what we do with our mind. We do these things with our mind based on delusion, and that is what causes the suffering. And what Buddha is saying is you just change the mental action, You have the realization of actually the whole bigger picture, rather than just your own personal view of assumption. And by understanding, by being brave enough to accept the bigger, huge, bigger picture, the whole thing. You know, when we talk about wholesome deeds and unwholesome deeds, this whole in wholesome deeds is the meaning of holy. When we say holy, like His holiness. When we talk about holy, we're talking about holy. Actually, it's supposed to have a W on the front. So wholesome deeds means virtue. Wholesome deeds means deeds that are with the intention of the whole thing, every being. So that's how you work out what a virtuous deed is, or a holy deed. And if you fill your life with holy deeds, then in the end, you have got what we call an accumulation of merit. And that accumulation of merit will, depending on what your intention with it was, like, so we dedicate our merit for the future of all beings, etc., etc. If it goes undedicated, then it will just cause a virtuous, luxurious life, a higher rebirth. And that is a wonderful thing, because that means that the practice of virtue has caused you to take a better rebirth, and that is a wonderful thing. But that's not really the point. The point of the Dharma path is for you to become liberated, free from suffering. And if possible, there's then the Mahayana path. The Mahayana path is for you to become liberated from suffering and to help others to become liberated from the suffering. So suffering is very important, and understanding the suffering is very important. Thinking about suffering is very important. Studying and examining the suffering that goes on in the world is very important. And you will find, I can't speak for everyone, obviously some of you might be naturally interested in suffering, but on the whole, generally, people are in denial. They would prefer to ignore it. And that, for a meditator, for a Dharma practitioner, is a big problem. The first thing that we need to do as a Buddhist, as a Dharma practitioner, as a spiritualist, anyone interested in psychology, philosophy, anything, you need to study the suffering and the causes of suffering, because that is the main point with all religions, is to end suffering. Not just for oneself, but obviously if you can end it for yourself, that's great, but also end it for all beings. Now, in the Buddhist path, this aspiration, this wish, this idea of ending all suffering for all beings isn't just some kind of fairy tale wish, it's a very, very strong, real, genuine, lifelong aspiration that we deeply meditate on, and it is called bodhicitta. Bodhicitta means, Bodhi means Buddha, means enlightenment. It means freedom from all sufferings, or gone to bliss, but that's quite technical to explain that. And citta means mind. So blissful mind, or awake mind, or enlightened mind, or liberated mind, but basically mind free from self-grasping, self-cherishing, what we call duality. Duality means myself and the others. So individually, we are all thinking myself and the others. So if you think about it like that, it doesn't make any sense at all. We can't all be thinking myself. Either we are all the others, or the truth is it's only one, single. There's no duality. Duality is the delusion. And so that brings us to the third line. Tonight's line, third great seal, given by the Buddha to all beings that are able to understand it, so i.e. the humans and above, is all phenomena are empty, devoid of self. And so I will try to explain this very profound truth, because if you can realize this, all your fear, all your suffering, all anxiety, everything is neutralized. And you have a very, very clear view, deep realization, which enables your mind to no longer be at the mercy of the torturous self-oppression. At the moment, we are under the thumb of the self, the idea of existence, survival. Because we have done it so many times before, we've had so many more innumerable lifetimes whereby we have been attacked, we've been predator, we've been prey in all the different realms. This obsession with survival is of common, and yet, as we all know, as from the first line, it's not possible to survive ultimately. But we believe in ultimate survival. Every animal believes in ultimate survival. And that is a big problem. And so our mind is confused by that, because the mind doesn't have any characteristics, actually. What we call the ground mind doesn't have any of these characteristics. These are an overlay, an intellectual overlay, which has developed through many, many past lives, as I say, evolution, you could say, but not just in this eon. Buddhist history goes back to beginningless time, innumerable eons of rebirths. So it's very big. But basically, the point is that we suffer from this habit. So the reason I keep hesitating is because the problem isn't personal. It's not for us. It's not our problem. We often talk about, or you hear Buddhists talk about, my past life, your past life, my future life, your future life. It's not mine or yours. It's the mind. The mind is deluded. The mind, yes, there's a mental continuum that goes through all our past lives and has led us to this life. And you could say there's a connection there. But you can't really call it an identity. You can't really call it a person. And when you start taking this personally, it makes the self more. It imbues the mind with the idea of the self more instead of getting rid of it. So it's very important that you understand that it's the mind that's deluded and not you. And part of that delusion is the idea of you. So that is a very, very important point. You meditate when you're at home and you're meditating and you're worried about yourself, about your future, about your money, whatever it is you're worried about. Try to realise that this whole situation is a state of mind. This whole situation, the idea of the self, is a mental delusion. It's not real. So this third line, where it means all phenomena are selfless, devoid of self, what the Buddha called, or they translate the Sanskrit word shunyata as emptiness. It means that where we think there's a permanent identity, a permanent persona, a permanent character, a permanent self that ultimately exists, is actually just a collection. It's a collection of parts. And if you go through those parts, you cannot find an actual intrinsic, inherently existent self. So, as an example of that, the Buddha said, you don't need to start on your own body, because this is very difficult for us. So what Buddha recommended was you find any object, a very simple object. For example, a table. A table is 4 sticks and a flat piece of wood, right? And you put the 4 sticks on the flat piece of wood and it becomes a table. If you take the 4 sticks off and I hold up one of those sticks to you and I say, is this a table? No. Any of those 4 sticks, even if I hold up all 4 sticks but without the flat bit, is it a table? No. If I hold up the board without the sticks, without the legs, is it a... They're only legs when you put them on the table. When they're not on the table, they're sticks. So if I hold up the board and I say, is this a table? Of course you'll say no. But as soon as I put those 4 legs on there, in your mind, it appears table. I don't even need to have a table here. I'm just talking about a table and you're thinking table. That's how the deluded mind works. It can grasp the inherent existence of an object without it even being there. All phenomena, all objects, all inanimate, meaning physical objects that don't move, and animate objects, meaning all the beings, you, me, and every animal, insect, plankton, God, every being, is a collection. is selfless. If you go through the body, if you go through our body, you will see that it is this skin is not the self. This mind is not the self. This thought is not the self. This eye is not the self. This bone is not the self. Yet, because we grasp it so strongly, so obsessed with survival from this habitual rebirth that we've been having for so long, this idea of an inherently existent core existence within anything, but especially oneself, is so strong. It's so absolutely, ultimately, concretely there, and as an edifice of permanent reality. And yet, when you go to search all the great Sakya masters, all the great scholars, all the great Buddhist masters ever that have come from all the Buddhas, have looked and researched and investigated and examined this mind and examined this body and examined existence and non-existence, and both together and neither. They've looked in every thought, they've looked in every intention, every consciousness, every perception. They've examined every single aspect of reality, and they cannot find an ultimately existent core, inherent self. And yet we absolutely run our lives on it. Our every thought is based on it. We're obsessed with it. When we're asleep at night, we dream, and that person in the dream is that self. When we're in our life during our day, at work, the reason we're working, the reason we're earning money is to buy food, to feed the body, and it's that body which we impute the self on. This body is the basic, what's called the basis of imputation in the Dharma. And yet it's the mind which imputes it. Just like your mind imputes on 4 legs and a top, it imputes the inherently existent table. And yet when you go over to the table, you can't find the table. If you now you know that it's a board with 4 sticks. The table is some kind not quite as real as it once was. And as your realization increases, as you meditate more, you'll realize that these things exist just in our mind. We've got like an Argos catalogue in our mind of all these objects out there. And all we need is someone to mention it, the word, and that concept brings up the picture. So when we're looking around, what we're doing is we're building up a world of inherently existent objects according to our mind delusion. Our mind delusion believes that there's a core existence in each one of these objects, each person. When you think of your friend has got a character, an inherently existent character, but that inherently existent character is just in your mind. If you go over to that person and you try and find your idea of that person, it's not in there. It's just in your mind. So we're all living in our own projected, it's all very similar because we've all been born in the same realm, and so we all have the same kind of karmic delusion. And that makes it worse because we all agree with each other and we all augment and support each other's delusion. But what the Buddha did was went off to the forest. And he said, no, I don't know, it's not true. He knew because he had many, many past lives as a spiritual practitioner. And in each life, he was ascending. He took what we call the very long path of the Bodhisattva. And in every life that he was reborn, he practiced this emptiness. He made sure that he checked, instead of just assuming, presuming that everything was inherently existent. What he said was, what he actually said was the plantain tree, but I'll just use the palm tree. We get the palm tree mixed up with the oak. We get the palm tree mixed up with the oak because the oak has what we call a heartstring running up the center of the tree. And from that heartstring, the rings grow and the tree grows, etc. And so that heartstring can be thought of as the core of the tree, as if it's got some kind of core existence. So that's what, that's its seed, that's its root of reality, it's permanent, and everything comes from that. But actually, this core existence, this heartstring, isn't actually in any phenomena. It's in our mind. We impute that on things. Actually, all of these objects, all of this phenomena is like the palm tree. The palm tree, as you know, has got no heartstring. It's all made of leaves. You dig through it and you can't find any inner tree, any heart, any trunk or rings, or it's just all leaves. There's nothing there, it's just leaves. And so Buddha said, this is a very good explanation, a very good analogy for the emptiness, the coreless nature, the real state of being of actual all phenomena. And all these objects, all this phenomena, we are really taken in by. And the reason we're taken in by it is because we believe that inside us there's a core being that needs to survive, that's a real, genuine, solid, concrete identity. And on that basis, by extension, we impute that core identity on everything else. And so that is what we call the deluded mind. And that deluded mind is what imputes intrinsic reality, a core self, into every single thing that we go. Every single thing that we get involved with, it gets worse because it has this reflection effect whereby you believe in a self, and then because your self gets deeper in that belief, other things seem to be more real, and then other things seem to be more real, so that imbues your mind with an even stronger sense of self, and backwards and forwards it goes, round and round like a circle, and we get deeper and deeper into the obsession of self. And that is why, when next time someone says to you, this world is being ruined by selfishness. The problem with this world is selfishness. Everyone's so selfish. If only everyone could be kind, it would be so lovely. Now you know why. That is the reason. Our minds have been conditioned, absolutely conditioned, deeply, we have deep-seated impressions and proclivities, propensities in our mind from so many past lives. One great Sakya master said, I know some of you might not be familiar with the 6 realms, but like I say, there's three upper realms and 3 lower realms. And one great Sakya master said, we make the suffering, we cause the suffering in the 3 higher realms, and we experience the suffering in the 3 lower realms. And so what this means is when we have the good fortune of being born in the 3 upper realms, we use those good conditions selfishly. We don't use those conditions to help others. We don't have the intention to help everyone. We may have the intention to help our family. We may have the intention to help our friends. But very, very few people have the intention to help everyone. So the first thing to do, if you wish to practice virtue, if you wish to change your trajectory in future lives, is to try to think of all beings as equal and not just your friends as more special, your workmates or boss, because all of these people have some kind of, you feel that they have some kind of benefit to you. So that is what we call contaminated. And that contaminated thought, the second line, is what causes the suffering. What we need to do is we need to have the intention for all beings to be happy and have the causes of happiness. For all beings to be free from suffering and destroy the causes of suffering. Yeah, so that is a very, very different thought to what people normally have. So now you can understand exactly how the spiritual path works, how religion works. Religion has become a very bad word in the West, and it shouldn't, because obviously the negative, let's say the beings who would like to obstruct the progress of virtue, stop happiness, beings who would like to destroy happiness, have made religion a bad word. Religion means removing all the suffering from every single being and making pure and absolute joy for every single being without exception. If you have that intention, if that is your basic aspiration every day and night in your life, you've got no worries. You've got nothing to worry about at all. Samsara, existence, future lives, they've got nothing on you. You're untouchable. And actually, if you carry on like that, if you carry on with that intention, with that thought, your future lives will get better and better. You will become more spiritually powerful, and you will end up like these great masters and these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who liberate thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of beings in many different ways, not just talking, but many different ways. They have all sorts of ways of helping beings. So actually, naturally, the question is, why aren't more beings liberated? Why is this information so little known about this ultimate truth of emptiness? And the reason is, first reason is the amount of beings innumerable. There's no way, even in the upper realms, the amount of beings, mathematically, it's absolutely infinite amount of beings have developed over such a long time. And the second reason is the state of our minds. The state of our minds, we have such little faith in holiness, in the wholesome deeds, in the whole thing. And we have so much faith, so much deep belief, obsessive belief in the self, that it's very difficult for enlightened beings to touch our mind, to make contact. We've got a very thick coating. The best way is through logical reasoning, and that is the reason why the Buddhas and the great masters and the Sakya Tibetan and the monasteries, etc., they try to talk to us, normal people, worldly people, and try to explain this very profound truth. The ultimate truth is profound, especially when you compare it to our normal worldly view. As I say, the normal worldly view is quite selfish. And the ultimate truth, the actual truth of reality is no such thing as self. It's all one thing. It's the singularity. You could call it the opposite of duality, the singularity. So we must start obviously it's easy for me to say, try to have this as change your view to this. Obviously that's ultimately the aim. But in the short term, you could just consider it every day. Whenever you can, try to remember, try to decrease one's own, we talk about ego. It's a very short word, and it means so much. It's a profound thing, really, to try to explain. But basically it means self-importance. We see ourselves as more important than everyone else. And that is the problem. And that is what causes rebirth, and that is what causes all the suffering. And so the practice as a solution to that is to realize that emptiness, the lack of core being in everything, oneself, others, and all phenomena. Any questions? Yes.
This gross mind that you talked about, this everyday mind, is that then the same as, you have to excuse me because I'm new to
That's fine.
Is this the same as the dualistic mind?
Yes.
The dualistic
Yes, the relative mind. I mean, that's why they call it the relative mind, because it relates. And it's got no need to. But obviously, to understand how the mind is the boss, right? The mind is the creator. Right? I mean, I shouldn't really say it because I'm a Buddhist, but I really like the way that the mind as the creator was presented as God, because it gives people something to, it gives a perceptible concept. God seems to be more relatable than just saying the nature of mind. Because actually the nature of mind is clarity in Buddhist, in the advanced scholarly view of, say, the Indian, like in the old days, in the 10th and 11th century, there was Nalanda University, and where it was just the highest Buddhist scholars and very, very miraculous things used to happen there because of all of their realizations, etc., etc. You can read about it. But that was based on understanding how relative mind and the clear mind are the same thing in reality. To be honest with you, if you imagine the clear mind, right, the basic nature of mind, which has got no characteristics at all, it's clarity, it's like light, right? Light out of a projector. The relative mind, otherwise known as our life, right, our life story, our lifestyle, our narrative, our commentary, is the film that and the projector. You hold the film in front of the light, and the light shines through the light and dark, which is the attachment and aversion. We all have attachment and aversion because we believe in a self. And that clear light shines through and produces the appearances, good and bad, suffering and joy, gain and loss, fame and blame, what we call the 8 worldly dharmas. So anyway, you can study all this, but basically, yes, we've got the relative mind, and below that we've got the ultimate mind. And please, as I keep saying, try not to take anything personally, but especially this. Don't think, oh, I'm suffering. If it helps you to study Dharma, if it helps you to realise that there's no self, then believe in the self. I'm suffering. The I in I'm suffering, that's fine. But in actual fact, it was all caused in previous lives, in our ignorance or in their ignorance. When I say their, I mean you in the previous lives. You can't remember who they were. We don't know where they were. We don't know anything about it. When you become more realized and your mind becomes clearer and more subtle, you will be able to remember all those past lives. That is a very important point. Can I just say that one of the main things about Buddhism is that the Buddha taught directly from experience, and the experience that he taught from was he could remember all his past lives. So he could see, in this life I did that wrong, and that caused that. I did this right, and that caused that. I helped all these people, but my motivation was slightly wrong. It's a little bit selfish, contaminated. So he could see the causes and effects through all his past lives, and he taught directly from that.
So I'm understanding from that actually rebirth is actually, I'm sensing that that's actually a negative thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So one is striving possibly not to have to reincarnate or
yes.
And if you reach a state of spiritual perfection.
You have to be careful with that though, because there's a self in it. What we're trying to do is liberate the mind from the self. So if you think, I will become a Buddha, the Buddha very famously, is a bit advanced, but the most famous sutra is the central sutra of all the sutras, Buddha's teachings, and it's called the Heart Sutra. And Buddha famously said in the Heart Sutra, there's no Buddha. So even the highest, if there's one being that you could say is actually real, because it's a manifestation of the absolute pure nature of mind, you'd think it was the Buddha. The Buddha said even the Buddha is not real. It means only thing that's real is the inexpressible nature of mind, the clarity itself, and it's beautiful, blissful, clear, and does no harm to anyone, but it's characteristicless. But when you get there, as you approach that, you can help many. There's a long period of approaching. And during that approaching period, you have the powers to be, you are liberated and you have the powers to help everyone else. And by the time you get to that stage, you will understand that clarity, that nature. It will be fine.
So is this about forgetting about yourself and thinking about everybody else? Is that what you're saying?
To start with, yes. Yeah, to start with, yeah, absolutely.
No altruistic tendencies. Basically, I live, I do for other people.
Yeah, I'd like to just use an example. We do a lot of offering in Buddhism, bowls, fruit, all sorts of things. And the idea, and prostrating, and the idea of these things is that it's a selfless act, a completely selfless act, and that is quite skillful. At first, your idea of a selfless act is probably almost definitely not going to do it. It's going to be your idea of it, your assumption. To a completely selfless act, for that, one needs to have a fairly good understanding, a fairly good realization of emptiness of all phenomena, oneself and others. But yes, the aspiration, your aspiration to commit selfless acts, help others, and have no intention in it for yourself, no agenda, that's the real practice, yes. It's difficult though, very difficult, because you don't understand why it's difficult, because our habit is completely the opposite. But it's a mental intention, that we're trying to, that's what is called the Buddhist path, that is the practice. If we can try and do that every day, use our life to perfect selfless acts, that would be very good. Action, karma, is the Sanskrit word for action, and that's where we get the idea of good karma and bad karma. Karma means action, and the more selfless your action, the more holy your action, then the better the circumstances, the result. The result of selfish action is suffering. The result of virtuous action is joy and good conditions, and good conditions. And you can use those. Then it's up to you, if you have the wisdom and the compassion, to use those good conditions to help others, and that in turn makes more merit. So it's an ascension. Whereas selfish act, and as many people are doing these days in the world, are trying to accumulate finance, accumulate wealth and belongings, and they are actually accumulating the causes of suffering. Absolutely. Because it goes against this, what they call unwholesome deeds. So it goes against the whole. Any act that goes against the whole will result in suffering. And when all of you become bodhisattvas, those people who are committing those negative actions now are the ones that you will have to save. Bodhisattvas means saints. It's a Sanskrit word for saints. So,
do we get to a state where we don't have to reincarnate? Is that the...
Yeah, Buddha famously said, when Lord Buddha appeared in this world, you could say born, the first thing he said apparently was, "This is my last time." So it's the bodhisattva chooses to come back out of compassion. I could tell one brief story. There was a very famous Indian bodhisattva, and living in a village in India. He was kind of, they knew him as the kind of local saint, and they knew it was ancient times, and in those days there were people who had great wisdom and kind of miraculous powers, etc. But the real ones keep it secret, so he just appeared to be just a normal sort of meditator in a cave. There were many. But this town, quite a big place, a brain disease, some kind of brain disease affliction appeared. And of course, doctors and medical, no one do anything. More and more people were getting ill and dying, etc., and going crazy. And in the end, they asked the Mahasiddha, this yogi living in the cave, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I know the cure." And they said, "What?" And they said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I know the cure. It's called a rohita fish. You only need one, because the medicine you can make, this one fish makes so much medicine, you could give it to the whole town." So they said, "Right, where do we get this fish from?" And he said, "Middle of the ocean." And they said, "What?" "Yeah, it's right down deep in the middle of the ocean." So they said, "Right, so, we're stuffed then." He said, no, it's all right. I will die and become one, and then I'll swim back. Today is Thursday. So Sunday morning, lunchtime maybe, something, you wait by the river. I'll swim up. So they said, okay. So he went into meditation, dead. And then Sunday they all went, waited by this estuary or whatever, you know. And sure enough, this red fish swam up. They caught this fish and they made the medicine and everyone got better. And that is a true story and a very famous Dharma story that Buddha told. And I'm telling you this because you asked about the selfless intention. And so when someone can just go like that and come back like that and then go like that, that is the bodhisattva life.
But as far as I understand that, a person who reaches the bodhisattva stage doesn't choose to reincarnate. He has no choice because he's not a Buddha. And a Buddha has no choice either. He can't come back because of what he knows. So it's
Very
not a
good.
question of, a bodhisattva who chooses to reincarnate. He's going to reincarnate whether he likes it or not, because we're a Buddha, he just doesn't. He
You're
can't.
right.
And that's made clear,
Yeah, yeah,
So I think we've got to look at these things,
yeah,
To me, I think the number one that Western needs is to be able to get on the path, because until you're on the path, you can't actually get in results in meditation. To be in the energy field of the Buddhist teaching, which is broader and deeper than other teachings,
Yes.
is the best,
yes,
The Buddhist teaching is the best, especially the great vehicle, right? So that is the most helpful to people, and that's the most fertile, best field. But other teachings are very successful and fruitful, and they achieve massive improvements in a person and enlightened states of mind.
yes,
Buddhism doesn't refute other teachings which go to different levels of understanding, but Buddhists can bring you through a huge number of other stages to a really deep understanding and help you to go more easily and quickly through the basic stages to get
yes,
real results, which is what we lack. We need to be able to show others that we have something vital and that we're getting marvellous, helpful things in our life
Yes.
without necessarily getting the ultimate.
yes,
What I mean? Which
yeah.
very few people can do that.
So there are three paths Buddha taught: Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And in the Vajrayana, basically one can practice making a connection with enlightened beings. So this is what we call the secret path, and it's very powerful, and it's particularly recommended at this time in history, because we have very good conditions. We have health, we have wealth, we have peace, relatively peace. And so we can use this very precious opportunity to use those conditions in the most optimal way with the most powerful practice. It's actually made for people. Buddha actually gave it to a king called King Bimbisara. And because the king said, I want to be like you. I want all your wisdom. I want all your realizations. Totally awesome. I just feel like a maggot, in your presence. And you are just, magnificent. And the Buddha said, then all you need to do is let go and allow the nature of mind to come out. And he said, I can't do that. I've got wives and palaces and gold and chariots. And he said, I got no chance. And they were the same age, this King Bimbisara and Buddha at that time, getting quite, old. So he said, I haven't got long left. What am I going to do? And Buddha said, okay, I'll give you this. There is a way, but it's sublime. It's profound. And you rely on an enlightened being. And through that practice, you can make the progress, even with all your, surroundings, your environment, your belongings. And so it's perfect for us, because actually, compared to those days, we are like those kings. We've got everything, we've got no real hardships with food or any, etc. So, and we can live in peace, etc. So this higher practice is excellent if you can. Find a lama, a kempo, someone, a genuine, authentic lineage holder. The person who gives you the practice, the empowerment or initiation, needs to have that lineage unbroken back to the fully enlightened Buddha. And if that's true, if that is actually unbroken, And these genuine masters are still here in this world, and you receive that initiation and you do that practice, especially if you do it unbroken every day, you can make extremely vast progress in one lifetime. So those methods we are extremely fortunate that we have got those methods still in this world, in this realm at the moment. Any questions?
Can I ask a question about selflessness? If we're supposed to be truly selfless, then why do we accumulate merit? Because I think you talk about accumulating merit.
Good question. Merit actually doesn't exist, right? Merit is the antidote or the opposite of demerit. Actually, we talk about merit as if it's an accumulation, but actually it just cancels out good deeds. Actually, just cancel out all our negative actions, all our negative deeds, and so we're just getting back to zero. And one great Sakya master called Dejan Rinpoche wrote a book, a very wonderful book, a commentary on the three visions, a very holy text, and he just called it Ordinary Wisdom. And I've always felt that ordinary in that title means that's what we're trying to get back to. A Buddha is actually ordinary because it's just completely natural. We are deficient. And so merit gets us back to the ordinary state of natural, pure mind. Does that go on?
That makes sense.
We call it merit, but there's no accumulation because obviously there's no accumulator. If there was, it's like we say in the higher texts, we talk about no meditator, no meditation, because everyone talks about meditation just like everyone talks about the accumulation of merit. But actually, when you realise that everything is a projection, everything is merely imputed by mind, so everything is the nature of mind in reality, there's no meditator or meditation. Yeah. But of course, this is all very advanced. But it's upon this vast, deep, progressed, motivation or understanding and realisation, this information, that you can base the earlier practices. The earlier practices are just reducing your selfishness in everyday life. That's just to start with, There's so much worry. Like I say, people are oppressed by the self. The one last thing I'd really like to say is I was reading His Holiness 42nd. There's a course available on the internet from Sakya by His Holiness. And it's called Clarifying the Sage's Intent. Anyway, you can go on Sakya. If you, Daniel can show you. Anyway, you can do the course, and it's basically based on the wisdom sutras or wisdom basket of teachings from the Buddha called Abhidharma. And Abhidharma is basically how to practice emptiness properly, but also with that comes all the preceding foundational meditations and lessons, etc. And I would definitely recommend everyone who's really interested in reading that, because those instructions are fantastic, perfect. And I forgot what I was going to say now. They was no, I can't remember. We were talking about merit, weren't we? Does that help? Selflessness.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, you need to understand that we are all, the best we can sort of be is ordinary, and that we're all starting from somewhere below.
Yes.
Because of, yeah.
Well, duality. The problem is duality. The problem is duality. Us and them. We all think that. We are born like that. And then what Buddha is saying is we don't need to carry on through life with that delusion. We're born with it from the past, but it's our choice whether we carry on with it or not. And what the majority of people are doing is they're carrying on with it without ever investigating, without ever checking. All Buddha said really to us was, you check. Is it valid? Is it beneficial? Is self beneficial? You think, what benefits do you get from that? What benefits are there in the long run? Because all contaminated things cause suffering. So all contaminated minds, all contaminated actions, anything with the self in it, anything we do with the self-intention, actually in the long run causes suffering for us and others. It's harmful for us and others. Why? Because it's against nature. The nature of everything is wholesome, is the whole, is all. So society now, of course, if you're thinking, this is ridiculous, how can we do this in today's world? It's true, it is very difficult because society is now built on selfishness. Governments are using selfishness to make money. They want you to buy nice things to make yourself look better than others, to have the latest phone. So you're not supposed to be happy with just usable utilities, things that you can just use, and it doesn't matter if they look a bit shabby, you can still use them. They want you to go out and keep buying new things, compete against each other. They want us to compete against each other. In Buddhism, in wholesomeness, there's no competition. There's only friendliness, and there's only compassion and kindness, loving kindness. That's the answer. But they don't want that. The system has got none of that in it at all. There's no... How many schools teach kindness? This should be the main lesson. There should be a lesson called kindness. It's the most important thing. It's the fabric of existence. It's the fabric of the world. This is absolutely ridiculous, the way society is going, the world is run. Profit and fighting and competition and trying to be the best. Ego, pride, jealousy, anger, greed. These are all poisons of the mind. No one will ever be happy. There'll never be any benefit from it. Everything will get worse. And I'm sure, I think, deep down, everyone knows that. So we've got to change. We are, us people here tonight, we need to go out into the world and change the world with kindness. That's the only way. It's the only way that anything's ever going to work, ever going to get better. You check in the newspaper, on the news, occasionally you hear about something good happened. Someone gave a tramp and whatever, it doesn't matter. We need to focus on that. We need to make sure that more of these good things happen, and eventually it will all change. This goodness will spread and people will realise the benefits of it. It must happen. Unfortunately, there are prophecies from the, Mahasiddhas and the yogis in the past who say that the world does go in, all worlds, all realms do go in cycles of selfishness, and then it gets so bad that people realise, and then kindness comes, etc. It goes up and down. But that doesn't mean it's pre-written. You have a choice. We do have free will to be kind or not. And I'm telling you that we need to be the bravest. The bravest people are the kindest. The weakest people are the bullies. The weakest people are aggressive. The weakest people are defensive and offensive. We refuse all that. Buddhists refuse all that. Any kind of harm, any kind of competition. We rely completely on virtuous loving kindness. And our saying is better to be killed than kill. And that is very difficult for people to accept. But how brave do you need to be to accept that, to live like that? It's better to be killed than kill. 99.9% of people in this world believe it's better to kill than be killed. So that's the problem. Any comments? By the way, killing is the worst of all the bad actions, all the negative actions. So please, no more, even insects, unless it's absolutely necessary. But obviously, if you're a genuine practitioner, there really isn't any circumstances where it's necessary. But please don't ask any questions. Don't get into that because it's very difficult. It can get very difficult. But one thing I can say is the opposite of killing is letting creatures go. The amount of merit in a fly trapped behind your window, on the very subtle level of mind, in other words, karma, just by letting that fly out, you've saved the life. I know it doesn't make any sense at all, because as soon as you let that fly out, it'll probably die. But it's just the way karma works.
How do you square the armed forces where there are Buddhist chaplains, right, and especially among people from the Himalayas, a lot of Buddhists there, and there's a people often minister to them, but their life is about killing people to order, you know, and they have no choice about that.
You know the answer. Don't be naughty. So I'll explain to you about letting the fly go. Actually, I can explain that. The reason the fly, this is how complicated karma is. If the fly is trapped in your house, there's more merit in releasing it out of the window than it is if the fly is trapped in a friend's house. And that is because the fly trapped in your house is occupied by you. You are the owner of that house. That's how precise karma works. When you let the fly out of another person's house, there's also good merit in that, but you're releasing it from a house that's not occupied by you. So it's very, very precise and accurate karma. And the same thing, killing, you know, is all depends on your intention. Accidental killing is not as bad as intentional killing. Intentional killing is the worst. And then worse than intentional killing is intentional killing with anger. Please never kill something, even a mosquito, with anger. That is the worst. So anyway, all of these things can be purified killing, for example. If you have done that, and I'm sure we've all done that at some point, we can now purify that by letting animals go. Even small insects, anything, feeding, letting them go, anything at all. Well, if you ever get the opportunity, please do it, because it will purify anything that you've done in the past. But as I say, finally, this is the end. The main thing to purify all negative karma is to contemplate the emptiness of oneself, others, and all phenomena. And the main practice is bodhicitta, wishing the full enlightenment for all beings, wishing that all beings attain the perfect bliss of Buddhahood. If you hold that in your mind, you will be amazed. Please don't just, think, oh, that's just a technique or something like that. It really is the main practice. First of all, of course, you have to have some understanding of enlightenment, but hopefully you've got some idea of that now. It's an absolute pure state where one is no longer afflicted by any sufferings, by existence, or anything. Your mind is indestructible and pure. And I say that the mind becomes indestructible and pure. And that really is the universal panacea. That really is the answer to all the sufferings of all the beings in all the realms, in all the galaxies, in all the dimensions. Every single being, when they become enlightened, become completely free, completely joyous, require nothing, do not need supported anything. They are completely what we call omniscient. They become one with the absolute. So that is the wish. That's the aspiration.
Is there a problem? Is there a problem with a business being successful, accumulating wealth, accumulating kudos? If the business is set up to help other people?
If the business was set up in the first place to help other people and it helped other people, wonderful. You know, that's a bodhisattva practice.
That's not a problem.
That's a wonderful thing. But like I say, intention is everything.
Intention is everything.
Intention is everything. So
per se, it's not a problem in Buddhist thinking.
no, of course not. We have to have, if we're living in the relative world, we have to have a relative practice. We're not monastics. In a monastery, you and I would be free to keep the mind free. But in the relative worldly life, we're not free to keep the mind free. We have bills to pay. We have, etc. Many challenges. And we are not also fortunate enough to be in a position where we can just go off into the woods and eat consciousness, which is what many of the great saints in the past did. They didn't eat. And then when they were asked, what on earth are you living on? You know, you don't even look that thin. One of them said, I eat consciousness. I mean, what does it even mean? So, but when you get to that level of, when each one of you, and I'm sincerely wishing each one of you to become a saint right now, so that you can eat consciousness. One of them said he eats sunlight. All right? But there's no food. But when they say that when Buddha left the palace and went into the forest for 6 years, ate nothing. There wasn't any food. He became incredibly thin. There are statues of him, skeletal. But in those 6 years on his own, with no one, it was in the deepest woods, forest of India. There was no one. He was on his own, and that was it. And he was just literally stripping away the mind. And that is what we all need to do. Just strip it away. Because it's all concept. There's nothing personal about it. It's all just thought. Next life, we'll do the same thing. We'll believe that this life is mine, I am me, this body is the self. We do it every time. Billions and billions and billions of times we've done that. We do it every time. And the only thing that's constant in all of it is the idea of a self. And then everything else generates and builds up around that. None of it's true. Not even the basic idea, the concept of a self is true.